and welcome to the Temple of Wisdom. I am your co-host this evening, Logical Troglodyte, along with my good friend, Jeff from Steaming Cup of Reason. Jeff, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff from the Steaming Cup of Reason. Welcome to Logic and Reason, the first episode of this great new channel. With us today, we've got some really special guests. I'd like to introduce the first one. He's one of the long-term debunkers from YouTube, Mr. Conspiracy Catz. Catz, welcome.
Thank you very much. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm good, thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks for having us on. Really appreciate this.
Just in case people don't know your really small channel there, Mr. Catz, why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you do on YouTube?
Well, the channel is just called Conspiracy Catz. I have another channel called Baldy Catz, and both of them take a little bit of a sideways look at flat Earth at the minute. I mean, I'll soon be moving on to other things, but yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell.
And thank you very much. And our other guest tonight is Jared from AT2 Productions. Jared, why don't you tell everybody what your little channel on YouTube is all about and what you do?
Oh, good morning and late evening, depending on where you are on this wonderful oblate sphere we call home. I am Jared of AT2 Productions, where on that channel we primarily just do the military view of the greatest show about nothing. It is quite literally an open discussion forum where myself and fellow veterans get together Friday nights before Psy Strikes movie night to talk about whatever comes to mind and whatever topics there are for the day, be it laughing and pointing fingers at the intellectually stunted by choice, or even talking about actual mental health and other veterans-related issues, and being a community for those of us more recent warfighters to actually have an outlet where we have that sense of community that some of us may have lost since leaving active duty.
No, yes, I completely get that. And joining us this evening as our chief mod to keep everything in line, and if anything goes wrong, we're going to blame her, Amy Hogan. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. So Amy is going to be making sure keeping an eye on the live chat. If there's anything, questions, at Logic and Reason. She is logged in as Logic and Reason, and she will get questions or comments to us throughout the show. And just in case anybody hasn't seen or heard about this channel yet, our intro trailer, what this channel is not a point and laugh channel. What we decided to do was to take a very serious look at individual conspiracy theorist claims. And in order to keep the conspiracy theorists from claiming a logical fallacy known as appeal to authority, we decided to bring together all of the educated men and women within our community who are the authority, who can speak intelligently and educatedly about these topics. Tonight's topic: conspiracy theorists are claiming that education is indoctrination. And I have really strong opinions and feelings, but before I get on a 2-hour soapbox and nobody else gets to sound off, I'm going to ask our guests, Mr. Catz and Jared, if they want to open this show by giving us your basic opinion, and we'll start to explore from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been a secondary school teacher, science teacher, since about 2001. So I know a little bit about how things in the classroom actually work and what sort of daily educational diet kids are getting. I know how the curriculums are planned. I know how the schemes of works are planned, and who decides what's taught to each particular child. So, hopefully I can use my experience a little bit to show that there's absolutely no indoctrination whatsoever. There's a lot of free thinking. There's a lot of opportunity for asking questions, and a lot of opportunity and promotion of different viewpoints.
Are we absolutely positive that there's no indoctrination whatsoever in the schools?
So that's where I love that you brought that up, because I was going to point out, so my experience on the on the subject specifically, I don't have the experience of being a formal, actual secondary school teacher or any level of school in that sense, but I was a work center trainer that was a military training certified person for my time in the Navy. So I actually had to go through the syllabus that your basic training instructors, your drill instructors have to go through, as well as all your follow-on A school, C school, your classroom-based special duty persons have to go through as well, just so it's a harmonized manner of delivery style to make sure that the training is given effectively. Now, with that, what I have found with the conspiracy theorists is they like to twist and manipulate what is actually meant by the term indoctrination. Because when you actually look at the root, the actual word indoctrinate, it does not have a negative connotation. It is quite literally to instruct in the fundamentals or rudiments of a particular subject, which is not bad. That is the actual purpose of your primary and secondary schools, to give you that foundation of these basic tenets that you need for your intellectual and daily social personal lives.
Yes, that's the archaic definition of the word indoctrination, but as in all things, it evolves. Language evolves, and today the word carries negative connotations for putting out ideas that and belief systems that have no real basis in science or mathematics, things that are unprovable. So that's the common usage that most people and conspiracy theorists are using. And so, yeah, the archaic, that's kind of cool, but that idea that our schools are teaching our children things that are better left to parents, that's a question too. Before I get too much deeper into this, Jeff, why don't you give us some thoughts on this?
Well, like Conspiracy Catz, I've also spent the past 16 years here in Vietnam as a primary school educator. Like Catz, again, I'm familiar with what happens in the classroom. And I actually follow a very similar curriculum. We are currently teaching the standard UK public school curriculum for English, maths, and science. And in my experience, I would not call what I do indoctrination, because what we're actually doing in the classroom is simply giving the students the tools they need to think critically and come to the facts on their own. And we just guide them along that path. We're not telling them this is what you have to believe. No, we tell them this is what is currently accepted as the truth, and then we show them how to verify and evaluate that as fact.
Right.
I'm sure Conspiracy Catz would agree with me on that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I was going to say, though, is I'm sure you've seen it as well, but a big shift in my time in teaching away from content and to exactly what you said, being able to empower the kids with the ability to think critically. One of the things that we always hear over in the UK is that the jobs that our kids are going to be doing in 10, 15 years time, most of those haven't even been invented yet with the with the development of technology. So we shouldn't be just plowing content into kids' heads. We should be giving them the ability to think and learn, as lifelong learners is kind of like a term that we use. So Exactly. It really is about delivering them those skills so they can cope, not about just forcing content.
Right.
To make better, more informed choices in their future.
Now, I don't know what the education system's like worldwide, which is why I asked guests from the UK. And Jeff, you're in Vietnam. Jared and I are in North America. So all I really know about, for the most part, where this is concerned, is North America school systems. And I'm educated and trained in psychology and clinical therapy. Okay. My actual specialty was in addiction recovery. So I have been a student, and I've been an instructor, and I've been a clinical therapist. So I keep abreast of what's going on in my field, which kind of branches out into other fields. And where this in education is indoctrination that the conspiracy theorists are actually coming from is a political argument in America, where you have, and it's both sides of the aisle, far left and far right, are trying to teach their political ideals and social engineering thoughts in schools. It started in the universities, and it's beginning to trickle down into secondary school and primary schools. And that's where that debate is taking place. But what the conspiracy theorists are trying to do is they're trying to co-opt that argument to basically paint the entire education system in North America as negative. Because if you can destroy that foundation that we can trust our educators, then that gives credence to their ideas, whatever conspiracy theory they tend to subscribe to.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually. I was going to ask Jared, you are currently a postgraduate student, are you not?
Yes, I'm actually. So I'm an electrical engineer and aeronautical engineer as my undergrad, and I'm recently gone back to school to specialize more in particle physics because I'm a curious SOB, and if the government is going to pay for it so I don't have to out of pocket, why not use that benefit while it's available to me?
Exactly. And like Logical said, when you're studying, do you have a limited trust in your teachers or your instructors?
I have a base level trust of all of them, but at the same time, because of the level we're at and the establishment that all of us in the coursework I'm doing have going into it, the professors are not afraid of us asking questions. So as we're going through newer material and working through things, it's not uncommon for an actual discussion to pause the material just to make sure that everyone is actually understanding. The whole thing of, oh, it's just rote memory, they're just trying to tell you what to regurgitate, that could not be farther from the truth from my own experience. It's not just a matter of you knowing what the outcome should be, but how you get to that outcome so you can problem solve it on the back end when it doesn't work.
Exactly. And how about you, Catz? Do you feel that your students trust you?
Yeah, I mean, the students I work with are obviously much younger, from 11 to 18. Excuse me. So I think, at that age, they've still got the inherent trust in, in an adult figure or authority figure, which I suppose is one of the arguments that conspiracy theories play on. But yeah, I don't think I've ever had anybody doubt me. No.
Yeah. The reason why I asked was exactly that, because I teach at the primary school level. My kids are much younger. I'm dealing with children at the ages of 8 and 9, so they have a very strong dependence on me to teach them things. So conspiracy theorists, they like to jump on that and call that indoctrination, and I kind of take that as an attack.
Absolutely. And I have seen an evolution in our education system in my own lifetime. I grew up in the 70s, and at that time in grade school and high school, graduated in the early 80s from high school, we were being taught, like Jared said, how to, not only what the outcome should be, but why it should be, how to get there, how to get from point A to Z, and all the steps in the between without making intuitive leaps or logical fallacious leaps across things. But then I dropped out of college at 19 to join the Navy. Some of it was for financial reasons, and some of it was a lack of direction. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to be, right? So I joined the Navy. I became a blue-collar worker. I wasn't able to go back to college until I was in my early 40s, after my children had already been raised and started families of their own. By the time I went back to college, I was already starting to see the political nonsense start to invade the classroom. And at that time, it was kind of like if you weren't a Democrat, if you weren't a Republican or whatever was going on at that particular school, then they kind of tried to shame you. So then I graduated and I started my career, and then I went back to school and decided to upgrade my credentials to the addiction therapy, and so that was much later. And then it was really, really liberal. In fact, it was almost as if being a middle-aged white man was bad. Yeah, and that's a weird political thing going on in North America, and I don't want to get off too far out of that. But that's the only place I see indoctrination is where those, because in my opinion, those conversations are fine in the halls of learning, provided it's an even discourse on both sides, and I get to make up my mind which side of the fence I want to sit on, or cross the fence back and forth. And then that's fine. But when you sit there as an instructor and tell me as a student that I should be ashamed of myself because, and then lay out all the social engineering arguments, I'm going to reject that. Because, what they're talking about has nothing to do with me personally. I'm sorry.
I would agree.
Yeah, I actually, a couple of the fourth years that are in a couple of the coursework that I took a year ago, actually last fall, were talking about a shared English professor that they had that acted in a similar fashion. And it really struck me in a way that how can an educator at this level have the gall to act in that manner? And come to find out, this person also had first year students as well. And if this is the behavior that he's exhibiting, I can see why there are a number of students who do at some point get disenfranchised with the process. And it is because of that personal influence in a negative way from the professors that are trying to provide the material. And that was one thing that my training in how to provide the material, one thing that was stressed to us is it's okay to veer off of the direct text of the material as long as the message is maintained. And they also encouraged to keep the audience engaged. Go ahead and take a moment and throw in a personal story of your experience that is related to the job you are doing, what we call in the Navy Sea stories. Add in one or two here or there to keep them engaged and break up that monotony that some people used to get in the mode of. But it's always done in such a way so that you're not discouraging the continuation. You're just keeping it lively, keeping it fresh, keeping it entertaining and engaging without losing the actual message of what needs to be conveyed.
Exactly. And when it comes to my expertise, psychology, that's a little more nebulous than, say, physics or aerospace engineering or electrical engineering. So at least in my area of study, it's really easy to get off track and off into these briar patches that we kind of don't need to be in. At least on an academic level.
Yeah, it's sometimes as a teacher, I do find myself going off on a bit of a tangent because I'm losing the kids' attention. But then I'm dealing with children that have inherently a short attention span, so I need to do that. But I always try to get back onto focus of the lesson as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to do. But some things, when it comes to like religion and politics, that's okay to be discussing on an intellectual level. But when it comes to like elementary, middle school, high school kids, I'm more of the opinion of, that's the teacher's, or that's not the teacher's responsibility. We're all human. We all have our biases, sure. But that's more of the families where the children are coming from. That's their responsibility. That's not my responsibility as an educator. My responsibility of an educator is to help them think critically, to teach them the information of whatever subject we're learning, and show them how to use it in practical application in everyday life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It can be difficult. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Catz. Go ahead.
It can be difficult, sometimes at secondary level, especially when you get to, 15 to 18-year-old sort of end, because, when you're teaching something, if there are political or moral things that surround the subject, the kids just, by their very nature, they're going to ask you your opinion on it. If I'm teaching IVF, for example, or genetic modification, they want to know, do you think this is playing God or whatever? And they want to have those discussions. So sometimes it can be difficult to avoid them. But, like you said, that really it is the parental responsibility, or the responsibility of the home life they've got to kind of like nurture whatever beliefs or opinions that they want their children to have. So I always just I'll engage in the discussion, but ultimately I'll never direct them to one belief or another. I'll tell them my personal belief, but I'll always leave it as, but this is a very subjective area. The last thing you can be doing is dictating to the kids, because if you've got 30 kids in the room, you've got 30 different opinions, and you can't placate all of them. They've got to be able to see that people with different opinions can have that civil discussion and then just walk away from it.
Yeah. And we've been discussing this now for 20 minutes. I would be surprised if our audience didn't have a few things to say on this topic. Amy, is there anything going on in the chat that you might want to alert us to?
Absolutely. There are a few great comments that I've been able to find so far. One ugly German truth said, need to have a certain level of general knowledge and comparable abilities, or they will fail out of the job market. As unfortunate as that may appear to an idealist, it's what society needs from schools as payback for the money and effort put into them. That said, nothing in this need for comparable education levels requires teaching of lies. And then Coral Hayward asks, logic and reason, what are your thoughts on private school versus public school?
Well, personally, I don't think there are differences between private and public schools, obviously. I grew up in a private church-run school through the 9th grade, and then went to public school for 10 through 12, and then college years. And I can see pros and cons on both sides. The one good thing I can really say about the religious school that I grew up in, and though they indoctrinated me into the theology, they were very heavy on the science. And it wasn't just learning facts and figures. We had science labs. We did projects. We had science fairs. So they adequately prepared me for what was going to come next. I don't really think if you're looking at either private or public, it really matters so much as long as you're choosing the school and the teachers that are teaching your children what you want them to know, so that they can be prepared either for a blue collar job, university, colleges, whatever you hope and aspire for your children.
Yeah. Growing up in the 70s myself, I went through the Catholic school system. And while I don't really agree with religion in the classroom, the private schools, whether they be religious affiliated or not, they tend to be better funded than the public schools. And as a result, the quality of the education is higher. But by the same token, I think public schools are more along the lines of equality for everyone, aside from other beliefs. Keep the religion out of it.
Yeah. Catz, Jared, any thoughts on that one?
So it's really interesting that topic came up to because of my unique connection to it. My wife has a son from a previous relationship, and when it came time for him to be of age to go into school, we really were faced with a question. We're in an area where we actually had private schools as an option compared to public schools. The nuance to this is the fact that my mother-in-law is an English teacher in what's is the middle school years here in the state. So we have an inside look at how the public schools are actually being operated in the town that he would have been going to. We made the decision to go to a private school simply because we wanted to make sure that our child, who we know can be a handful, we knew he was going to be the class clown. So we wanted to make sure that the faculty in general at the school that he was going to wasn't just going to push him along and let him skate by just being cute and funny and just, chop him on down the line. We wanted to make sure that he actually got the education and information that he needed in order to progress on and actually maintain that standard and actually be willing to have that communication back and forth between the school and us at home. That way, if he's acting up, we can work on it from our end at home and have that consistency of, no, you do not act like that in class. You do not act like that at home. You're not going to be able to get away with these certain types of behavior. And a lot of the public schools back when I was growing up during the 80s and 90s, smaller towns, you tended to still have that potential avenue for communication. But nowadays, here in the U.S., at least in this area, what's been communicated from my mother-in-law is that a lot of the other teachers, when they're done with their grading and when they're out of the building, they want as little to do with anything associated to the school and the classroom as possible. So it's almost... there's not that extra passion and actual zest for what the overall goal is. It's not just, okay, we're going to cover this subject. You're going to learn this in math, this grammatical base in English. We wanted the staff to actually be passionate about the progression of the children who are going to the school, not just from an academic, but as an overall be a better person. All throughout.
I think you make some very valid points there, Jared. When I was a young boy, I emigrated to Canada when I was 5 from Holland. So when I arrived and went to grade 1, I could not speak a word of English. And as a result, I was held back for a year while everyone else moved on to grade 2. Nowadays, I very, very rarely ever see children being held back for any reason at the primary level. Do you see that at all, Catz?
No, it's a really good point. That I don't think in my entire career I've ever taught a pupil who's been held back. I think the only time I've taught people who are slightly older is when I've been teaching A level and they've chosen to take a year or two out. But no, I mean, but then again, teaching has changed a lot. In the time even I've been doing it, and sort of like the word intervention now, and what's the word I'm looking for? The things that they will do that for children who otherwise would be held behind. These kids are taken out, they're put in very intense sort of like small groups, and they're dealt with differently. So they're dealt with outside of the main class to try and get them up to speed, at least in their English and the maths, so they can be put back in with the peers. But I've never known anybody be held behind.
Yeah, they really do start to push more towards the remedial education over and above the regular classroom time.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of going towards some of the idea that, everybody's special, nobody's a loser, and I think people think of being held back as a punishment instead of I'm helping you to succeed. In the 70s, when I was in grade school and high school, that was a fairly normal practice for a student that was falling behind. And in the late 70s and the early 80s, when I was a young adult, then children were being adequately prepared if they wanted to go to college. But I'm seeing this when they're looking at it, holding back as a punishment. I also see that 4-year degrees are often taking 5 years because the first year they're playing catch up because they're ill prepared for college. And a lot of these students that are freshmen in colleges today never would have been accepted to a college when I was 17 to 19.
It is beautifully amazing that you brought that up, because that parallels my story in such a way that I actually took stock of myself midway through high school. Because of my situation with my parents, I bounced between two schools midway. And so a lot of what I covered in my freshman year at one school in secondary, they were redoing in sophomore year and were trying to get me to go back over. So there was a lot of conflict just to get me to keep on the proper path in classwork. And I got frustrated with it. I pretty much threw my hands up and was like, you know what, I'm going to do enough just to get by at this point. And then about a year later, I looked back and I was like, okay, that was a mistake. And when I took stock of everything from there, I realized it's like, okay, my own habits are not conducive to go from high school straight to a 4-year college. Not at all.
Yeah.
So it was a question of, what do I want to do? Part of that analysis was I would get bored in class because I picked up the material really quickly. So I made the decision. It's like, you know what? I'm going to get out of the house. I'm going to go do other things and actually work with my hands, be tangible. And I ended up picking the Navy over the other branches. So the fall after my senior year of high school, I left home, never been back since. But after some time through the military training structure, I realized I was like, okay, no, this is good, but this blue collar work is fun. I enjoy it, but it's not my long-term goal. So I took advantage of the tuition assistance program while I was on active duty. I got my bachelor's and associates while I was on active duty. Nothing out of pocket, and they worked around the military schedule because the school was on base affiliated with the U.S. Navy, and it was affiliated with my specialty being in aviation electronics, the in-depth repair. So the military training that I picked up, rolling on through into the degree plan, really helped me realize, yes, I ended up making the right choice. And having a staff at a school be able to recognize the potential for these things, to get some students to realize maybe a 4-year college isn't right for you, but you're not left out in the dark. There are other avenues. You don't even have to go military. You can work a trade. You can do skilled labor. It's about finding what that student is passionate for and also what their capability is in, and not looking down on anyone if they choose and actually make the proper choice for themselves. That going into the system of just high school to college and then figure things out is not the wisest choice for me. The more people we get to do that, the better the education system will be, and also the better society has the potential to become and actually get back to what it was thought it was going to be by this time in the US, and probably even more so worldwide. You know what? I might just be a dreamer, though. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? I know when I was going through high school, our school had an in-house guidance counselor, and they were really instrumental in working with my teachers and helping me get through some of the difficult spots in high school. I don't know if they have guidance counselors in the schools in the US and the UK, but in Canada, they do. And I think it's a great idea to have them there.
Absolutely. And I know I sound kind of like the old guy that wants to reminisce about the good old days and, looking at my memories through, gilded lenses or whatever. And I'm not really, because I do realize that education has evolved. When I was in grade school, it was, for the most part, you were sitting at a desk. We did have science lab, we did have biology lab, but that was only 1 hour of the day. And the other 7 hours, we were sitting at a desk, we were reading textbooks, we were working on the blackboard. Very, very traditional. But psychologists have done a lot of studies and found out that different people learn in different ways. Some people are tactile learners, they learn by doing. Some people learn by reading better. Some people learn by hearing or seeing better. And I think the modern educational system has done better bringing more of that into the classroom so that any student can learn in any way that's the best for them.
Absolutely. As teachers, we are highly trained to recognize the various learning styles of the students in our class and plan our lessons accordingly. Wouldn't you say, Catz?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the UK, maybe about 12, 13 years ago, there was a massive push on something we summarized as VAC, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners, which
Yeah.
are basically summarizes what you said. But I mean, one thing that stuck with me was from that was when I plan a lesson, I will plan a range of different activities in that lesson that try and incorporates all of those. You know, I think it's impossible for me to sit down with 32 kids and say, right, well, this is his preferred style, that's her preferred style, and try and cater on an individual basis. But if I can make sure that a lesson is incorporating all the different learning styles, then well, that's the best I can do with it. But it's certainly at the forefront of my mind that people do learn in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, as long as we cover the 3 learning styles, everyone in our classroom should benefit from the lesson.
Definitely.
And Jeff and Catz, you are the 2 that are full-time educators in our little group here, so you have the most experience with this. Have you ever, and if you do, how do you address it with a parent when they come to you and they start questioning, why are you teaching my child this or that? I don't agree with this or that. I think this might be a lie or indoctrination where this is more acceptable to me. Why are you doing this? How do you address those things?
For me, that can be difficult sometimes because parents don't really understand the methodologies that we are using in the classroom completely. So we kind of have to educate the parent into the methodologies we're using and why we're teaching what we're teaching, because it sets them up for the next lesson and so on and so on. But many parents just don't get that. How about you, Catz?
I suppose it's fairly simple at a high school level, because we are building towards those final exams, the GCSEs or the A levels, so the reason we're teaching certain content or certain skills is so they can, or teaching certain arguments, and we do look at both sides, is so they can pass a certain exam or whatever. But those issues tend to be dealt with on a whole school level. Nobody would go to the classroom teacher and say, or I've certainly never experienced it, why are you teaching this? Why are you teaching that? What I have had experience of, excuse me, our parents contacting the school because they don't want their child being in a lesson where we're teaching reproduction, for example. The traveling community in the UK, the culture there is that people find out for themselves about that. They don't want their children sat in a lesson learning, so they're withdrawn from those lessons, and the school tends not to have a problem with that. If a parent says, I've got an objection to my child being in a lesson while this is being taught, I want them withdrawn from that lesson until that content's finished. Schools are fine with that.
Yeah, generally.
You used a term I'm unfamiliar with, Catz. What do you mean, the traveling community?
I suppose the politically incorrect term would be gypsies.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kids who bounce from school to school to school.
I know what regularly. That is. Okay. And since we started this conversation talking about a conspiracy theorist claim, have any of you in the classes that you've taught been approached by a conspiracy theorist who was accusing you of indoctrinating your children and teaching lies?
Well, online, yes. Good old Mr. Matthias.
Well, yeah, but I mean the families directly responsible for the children you're teaching.
No, never.
I've had. Oh, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I've had. I think 2 kids in my entire time who have come to me and said, well, for example, my grandma believes this, or my uncle believes such and such, and they think you're telling me porcupines, but I've never had a child come out and say, I do not believe what you're saying, etc. So I've kind of had it passed secondhand to me.
Because I know here in America, when the rapper B.O.B. came out as a flat earther, we had a rash of high school students from 8th grade to 12th grade going to their teachers, telling them, screaming at them, "You're teaching us lies." And it was a huge furor for a couple of months. And I don't know if it's just something in our water system over here that's creating more stupid or whatever, but I didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world on that front.
I think a big part of that. I mean, I can imagine something like that happening here if it was a big UK celebrity and stuff. But kids are kids, and they love to jump on a bandwagon. At the minute we've got like a lot of kids storming out of school for climate change protests, and I've nothing wrong with that. I've got absolutely no problem with that. But actually, when you speak to the kids about why they're protesting, they've got no idea, even a lot of them, what climate change is or what they're trying to achieve. It's just a bandwagon they can jump on because everybody else is having a moan or a whinge or whatever. So, kids are kids.
Yeah, I remember when I was 14, 15, trying to find out who I was and what I believed in and what I stood for and what my ethical compass and moral compass was going to be. And yet you're right. It's really tough through that self-discovery stage.
Now,
Especially for the younger children.
Now, getting to the difference and disparity between the UK, Canada, and the US, I'm seeing as how I have the asset of my mother-in-law. Early on, when I was still just dating my now wife, I actually tried to have a discussion with her to try to find out just how much the standardized testings impacted the public school system here in the US. I mean, it doesn't really sound like it, but in the other countries, do you have issues with that sort of thing where you have a curriculum that ends up having to be manipulated in such a way to point towards a specific standardized test that can almost be too invasive to what a more rational and logical plan should be?
No,
I haven't really seen a big issue.
Yeah, I have some pretty strong opinions about standardized tests here in America. And I think when the government got involved with the No Child Left Behind thing and started doing the standardized testing, I think they hurt our education system with that, because they weren't taking into account, the students who were higher achievers than others and some that were the middle ground. And I think it kind of hurt them overall when they tried to make everybody a winner and everybody's going to go to college. And I think some of that thinking was having a narrow definition of success. And Jared, you said it best earlier, I think, in my opinion, when you were talking about job satisfaction. When I decided at 40 years old to go to college and study psychology, my father hit the roof. You're not going to make any money. You got to be somebody and make something. Unless you have a PhD, you ain't going to make shit. And it's like, you know what, Pops? I would rather make $35,000 a year doing something I really am loving than 60,000 or 80,000 a year in a job that I dread and can't look forward until Saturday.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Can I just add something to the old the question just asked about the standardized tests?
Go ahead, Catz.
Yeah, I've seen some. Our standardized tests over here are called GCSEs that you sit when you're 16 years old, and schools are very, very harshly judged on the results of those. And I feel really strong that they do hugely negatively impact the kids, because schools have now, and this is one of the main reasons that I'm walking away from the job. Schools have now become exam factories, and the practices I've seen, the things that some schools are doing to ensure that when those results come out, they look more favorably than the school down the road, for example, are shocking. I'll give you an example. I worked at a school a couple of years ago, and what that school did, it allowed the pupils to take the options, if you like, choose the subjects they're going to sit their exams in, and they all chose 10 or 11 subjects, and they were happy as Larry. These kids, they weren't academically very bright, but they were learning all these different subjects. They had a really nice, broad and balanced sort of curriculum. And then a new head teacher came in, and the head teacher decided that he wanted his school to get a better set of exam results. So without any consultation with the parents, without any consultation with the kids, he removed a lot of the subjects that the kids were studying and enjoying, taking away the music, the drama, the art, all the things that you would be considered non-academic but still very important. Crammed in, so much extra maths, English, science, and then as a result, the kids' exam results were slightly better, but they had to spend 2-3 years at school not doing the things that they'd signed up for, and not having the wider experiences, that the parents would hope that they get, and that's all to make the school look, more favourably when these results come out. So I think they are negatively impacting kids.
Yeah, I think maybe you're right. In Canada, in high school, in the grade 10 and 11, you start doing what's called the provincial exams. They're basically a form of standardized testing, but they're designed mostly just to make sure that you have to pass that test to show that you have the minimum required level of education to gain credits towards your diploma. You have to have 21 credits in Canada to graduate from high school, at least in Quebec. And that's what these provincial tests are designed for, to make sure you have the minimum required education to gain those credits and get your diploma. Other than that, they're not really designed to hold you back. If you don't have the required credits at the end of high school, you simply go back for another year, or you can choose to go on.
So, Amy, we've been going at this for another 20 minutes. Again, what's going on in the chat? Amy?
Yes, we've got some really good ones too. Crystal said, not Crystal, hang on, let me a second. I just lost the comment. I'll find it just a second. But she said, when you were talking about the private school question, she said to say thank you, and it's going to help her make a decision too. Let me see, what else did I have?
Well, so there was one that I noticed, because the question came to my mind right as it came up in the chat from BM Furball. I'm trying to see where we ended up saving it, if it's even there still. Oh, God. It had to do with a specific subject. I want to say it was right here. There it is. So, Catz, this is more towards you with the UK textbooks. Do you see any bodies or even individuals trying to push to get creationism put into the textbooks?
Right. So not from a science point of view. As a science teacher, we do teach various alternative ideas. So we do look at, for example, steady state theory versus the Big Bang, etc. But there's never been a push to get creationism into a science textbook. But if you look at the school as a whole, when you place them into an RE lesson, then they are taught creationism. So it's not something we deal with in science. The kids will get that teaching in other areas. And into breaking up. I'm sorry. My Google Assistant decided to turn on unexpectedly.
Wonderful.
But anyway, that was one of the things that got me into the conspiracy debunking community, was when I read that the state of Texas here in America was successful in getting creationism taught and I'm pretty sure it's in the science classes as an alternative theory. And I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. That's no. The next thing is you're going to, and I know there are some people lobbying to get flat Earth in there, and I totally object to that.
Here in Asia, we don't see any of that at all. The school system here in Asia is completely separate from any kind of religion.
I think something like creationism that we talked about has a place in a religious studies lesson, because it's got a certain historical significance to it, and it's good to be aware of what people used to think. Except, flat Earth. Other than knowing that some people used to think the Earth was flat, it's got no substance to it at all. It's not a valid thing. So it would be ridiculous. I mean, what would you teach? How could you build a curriculum around flat Earth? There's nothing to teach of it.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a little bit about flat Earth when I was in grade school, but it was along the lines of teaching us the evolution of scientific thought. Starting with Sumeria, through the Greeks, through Copernicus and Galileo, and into today. It wasn't taught as an alternative theory. It was taught as part of the history.
Yeah, a stepping stone to what we know now.
And I just can't believe these people that want to treat it as something that's just, a serious theory topic. Of course, when I say theory, I'm using the scientific version of the word, not the layman's version.
You had something, Jared?
Yeah, oh no, it's just that is flat Earth and even creationism has its specific areas where it is relevant from a historical standpoint. And that's really where I've seen it best addressed and where it should remain. Flat Earth was the starting point. It quite literally is, this is how my direct reality appears to be. That is the foundation from that science came from. Once we started developing the means, methods, and tools, both intellectually and actual physical tools, to be able to challenge and further determine what's taking place, that's when flat Earth went out the frickin' window.
Yeah, and it should stay out.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the whole religious and creationism thing. The best, in my opinion, the best place to cover that sort of topic is in a class that my high school that I graduated from had, that I think all secondary schools should have. There was a myths and legends class where all we did was actually look into the mythos, both written and documented oral traditions of different cultures and religions worldwide. And we even started comparing how many of them had certain similarities. As such, when you look at it, when you look at the Abrahamic religions and other cultures that grew up around the Mediterranean, when you look at their creation myth, it always starts out as everything began in a paradise and then something happened from there. But then when you look at the Germanic tribes and up towards Scandinavia and the Rus out towards what is now Russia, their creation story starts with, there was nothing. Like, quite literally, in the Norse mythology, it starts out that there was nothing upon the land but dark and cold. When you start to factor in the locations that these mythos come from, it starts to make sense on why their myths would follow a certain type of narrative. So once you take that out of the equation and start looking at things objectively in that manner, you can start picking it apart and making sense of the culture of the people, the area they were from, and even how they would potentially end up progressing from that mythological base. And it's fascinating where we've come from all of those different roots.
And it's great that you brought... Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, go ahead, Lon. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's basically the basis of indoctrination, really. Education involves seeking of facts, but indoctrination is simply influencing people to believe things without actually backing them up in any way with anything more than opinion.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jared, because that's something I've been saying for years, that, when it comes to any mythos, any modern religion, you can't view those texts through the lens of our modern culture. You must and have to understand the language and culture that wrote those in the first place to have any real context. Otherwise, you can make it say anything you want it to say. And again, that's not the way education works.
What do you think, Catz?
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think it's being a science teacher when the content I deliver, with it not being, with it being a little bit more black and white. You know, we don't really get into the kind of topics that require a subjective view. Some things we do, but it's not something that I really deal with on a day-to-day thing in the classroom. Everything we talk about has been proven, has been shown, and we don't really take that subjective view at a lot of stuff. Some things like IVF, or things that have a little bit of a moral tilt, but not much at all.
And I see that Amy's been kind of letting me know in the temple chat that there are some things going in the live chat she wants to bring to our attention.
Oh, cool.
Yes, there are. I've got a couple comments here. It was Coral Hayward that said to say thank you to the both of you. That was helpful. She thinks the smaller class size of the private school will be beneficial to her child, although more expensive. And then I got some really good comments from Ugly German Truths. And he says the problem with U.S. curricula is that every school district can decide on their own, and they are elected, so only the idealists and nut job idealists bother to try to get into the board, with results like the infamous Texas school books are in raw fights against, telling about Moses having inspired the U.S. Constitution and so on.
Great comments. I always love hearing from Ugly German Truths. He's always got a lot of good things to say. And
I'd like to hear Jared's response to that.
Ugly German Truth and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, and I do completely agree with that. Part of why the U.S., not just from the education system, but the society in general, what we are seeing as symptoms, I really do believe has at least a partial root cause from a lack of involvement from the everyday person in the governance of even just their town, starting at the immediate local level, being involved and actually using the voice that the wonderfully laid out constitution and laws of not just the nation as a whole, but each individual state does afford you as being a citizen of this country. You have the rights, you have the ability to be involved in these manners. And for people to be discouraged because they think, oh, I'm just one person, what can I do? Look who's in the White House. We can do better. We can do better than the majority of candidates that have been put before us for a good 25, 30 years. We just need to remember that it's not us having to cater to them. They work for us. Without us, they are nothing.
Yeah, people
They often
tend to
lose sight of
see.
that.
Yeah, people tend to see men in power as having power without truly understanding that men don't have power in and of themselves, and they don't take power. They're given power by us.
Exactly. Well put, Logical. Well put.
And Babes and I were, wanting to watch a movie the other night, and we found one from 1960 called Inherit the Wind. If you haven't seen it, I suggest go watching it because it's still relevant today and is certainly relevant to this conversation. It's about the Stokes trial from, I think it was 1920 or 22, something like that, where a science teacher in Tennessee was imprisoned for teaching the theory of evolution because their state law said it had to be biblical based.
Wow. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, when you
Go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
When you hear stories about that, it's really fascinating to see just how far in a relatively short period our nation did progress. I mean, even just look at how the interaction between men and women in the 40s and 50s versus even just in the 80s and into the 90s, and then the change just from the 90s to today. The constant evolvement of the society has almost had a detrimental effect with how much it has changed over a short period. And again, you have people who forget that we as the populace, the way it is set up, we have more direct influence over not just our own individual lives, but also the lives and the progression of the world we are a part of. I always tell everyone, even if I don't agree with you, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your voice. Actually use your voice in the manner it was intended for.
Yeah. Have the conversation.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of the conversation either. You may not agree at the end of it. The point of the conversation isn't inherently to get the other person to agree with you. Sometimes just having the conversation is, how can I better understand this person who doesn't see the issue the same way I do? And by coming from that standpoint, you can then better understand not just the issue, but them and even yourself.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely. And I love what Jeff says at the end of all his videos on his channel. Yeah, never be afraid to
speak your mind. Just think before you do it.
Exactly. I love that line. And psychology studies have shown that people who have a higher level of education and people who are active in the political process, even if it is just on their local level, and people who engage socially outside of work and outside of their home life are less likely to fall into conspiratorial thinking. And conspiratorial thinking isn't in the DSM so much as a diagnosis, but it is talked about under delusional thinking. And when we start raising a generation of people that are taught to mistrust the government, mistrust their teachers, mistrust any form of authority, we're raising a bunch of mentally unstable people who easily fall into delusional thinking, and it scares me because at my age, that's the generation that's going to be taking care of me in my dotage.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to get... Oh, go ahead, Catz.
No, sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask for some opinion from both you and Jared. With the recent shift in the U.S. education from the Common Core to STEM, how do you see that affecting the future of your education system?
Sorry, what's happened in the US? It's shifted from what, sorry?
It's from Common Core to STEM.
STEM as in science, technology, engineering, and maths. Is that the how you?
That's correct. Yeah.
We've had all schools in the UK have an obligation to STEM, and we've had that pretty much throughout my entire career. But I've got to be honest, the way that's delivered is very much different on a school to school basis. Although Ofsted might come in, Ofsted is kind of like the body that will assess schools in the UK. Although they may come in, they don't really make STEM provision a priority. As long as you have a STEM coordinator, somebody that's willing to drive that in the school, they're more interested really in looking at the results and the teaching and learning. So my experience of STEM in schools has been very, very inconsistent. Some have delivered it very, very well. Some really haven't delivered it at all, and it's just written down on policies and bits of paper. So it's not really had a widespread impact. But it's a shame. Yeah. It's a shame that it hasn't. But it hasn't.
Yeah, well, I'm in favor of STEM, obviously, but I think when we make blanket policies like this, we start to forget those students who don't have the aptitude for STEM, and the Common Core is better suited to them, so that they can be successful in jobs that they can get otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Jared, what do you think?
Oh, I remember seeing the introduction to Common Core, and I am exceptionally adept at math. I mean, just for the electrical engineering side alone, I've had to do calculus, calc 1, 3, differential, vector algebra. I mean, that part of it is what really racked my head, because when I saw how they were trying to explain and go through a problem on just basic arithmetic, blew my mind how someone using the older tenets can get to the right answer in a fraction of the time of Common Core, but they were so dead set of, nope, got to do it this way. This is what we're teaching. This is how it has to be done. There's no other way. And it's like, that's not exactly the case. There are other ways. And I think that was my frustration, is the pig-headedness that it was adapted and that it was put forth with, how it wasn't allowing as much latitude as has been done previously. And now with the shift away from that sort of abstract thinking to now refocusing on the STEM fields, I enjoy it. That's what I'm in. And in my opinion, if we remind the kids that it's okay to be smart, it's okay to be a nerd. I mean, I have a series on my channel that is dedicated to nerddom. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of your intelligence. Don't be afraid of your gifts and what you have to offer. Because here's the thing. You can be absolutely crap at math and science, but still be a nerd and still be intelligent about something. Find what that is, find what it is, and run with it. If you love what you do, you will never work a day in your life.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
I'm not as adept as Jared when it comes to mathematics. I had to really work at it. And I couldn't see myself in a job that, like an engineer, that's centered around math. But the education I did receive taught me not only, how to learn what I was learning in school, but how to learn and self-educate after school. So even though I have an education in psychology and counseling, I have self-educated a little bit in physics and a little bit in cosmology and a little bit of all these other things that have interested me. So without that basic education and teaching me how to critically think and how to learn, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I don't think I would be as, I don't know how interesting I am, but I'd be a hell of a lot less interesting if I didn't have that foundation.
It's our responsibility for people like Catz and I, who are professional educators, to encourage our students to go beyond the classroom and continue looking into things and finding out more details and coming back to the class with that information and sharing it. That's not always a very easy thing to do, but I always encourage my kids, whatever you learn in my class today, go home and ask mom to go on the internet with you and try to learn some more and tell me about it the next time I see you. Catz, What do you think?
Catz, you still here? Maybe he.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay.
I was answering away, but I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. That we've had this big shift in the curriculum to becoming, like, the term we use, I don't like buzzwords, but the term we use is like lifelong learner, being able to equip kids with the curiosity and the skills to go and find stuff out for themselves. And this even links back to what you were saying before about people not being equipped to start, a 4-year course straight out of school, because a lot of them haven't been successful in developing those skills, and that is affecting them negatively later on in life. So it's so important, more than the content. It's so important we give them those skills and that curiosity, definitely.
Yeah. And Amy, anybody in the chat have anything to ask or to add to our current conversation?
Actually, yes. I have one from Kristen B. She, man, honey, she asked, how can a parent give input on new curriculum if teachers have very little to no say in curriculum changes after trying it out? And then had another one that was really good too from Coral Haywood. And she said public schools really need to improve how they deal with and try to teach special needs children. It's her experience that they damage them instead of understand and teach.
Yeah.
I think there's conversations in there, but I'm going to let our two professional teachers start to address those.
Yeah, I think a lot of those issues really require a very specialized training or just specially trained teacher that are particularly trained in dealing with special needs kids, because it is very, very difficult for a standard teacher like myself to often deal with these kids in my classroom because they are just too unfocused. You really need to have a specialist in there. And unfortunately, a lot of schools just don't have the funding to bring on a professional of that level. Catz?
Yeah, well, regarding that one, that's something that's really changed in the UK in the time I've been teaching. If I go back to my NQT year when I first started, I'd have the best they could do is put those special needs children in very small sets. So I might have 10 or 11 children, but again, I'd be on my own and I wouldn't have the understanding of really what their needs were. And of course, we'd do our best, but we'd let them down. But as time has gone on, schools, in my experience, have become so much better and so much more aware at how to provide alternate provision within the school day for these kids, that I'm seeing children that would have been let down 15 years ago now making some really good progress. So I think it is something we're definitely improving on. But I do agree, some young teacher fresh out of teacher training school is ill-equipped to deal with them on his own.
Yeah, even with the modicum of experience, it can still be difficult.
Right, definitely. And I'm actually going to ask Amy to get into this part of the conversation because she doesn't make any bones about it. She has a special needs child, and so what do you think about this, Amy? What is your experience with the educational system with your child?
Actually, I have been pretty lucky with my school district. They do ask for my input, which is wonderful. We have a great school right now, and one of the very first things that I tell them when I meet them now is, by the time my child's career is done at your school, you are going to be so sick of me because I'm in there all the time.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's usually passing on positive information or information that we've learned about what Matt is doing and how he does and any behaviors that crop up. So I have meetings there constantly. I am involved. I go into the classrooms. I'm actually in the classroom sometimes all day long, volunteering, watching what goes on, seeing what happens in that classroom. He's actually in a specialized classroom just for kids with special needs, and he has one-on-one help and sometimes two-on-one if I'm in there. And so yeah, I do give a lot of input on how he learns best. They give input to me. We coordinate so that things are the same at home as at school as well. So like I said, I'm always in there constantly. We're always having meetings. I've had very good luck with that because most of the time they're very receptive to what I have to say. I'm very lucky to have a great school district that way.
So I take it from the comments we've been getting in the live chat that we probably have some parents of special needs children. And it sounds like some of them are a little frustrated with their school. Would you have any advice to offer them, Amy, as far as how to approach the school or how to, I don't know, how to.
I think the best thing to do is soon as the school year starts, I know it's a lot of hard work because I have to do this too, get to know the teacher, get to sit down and talk to them, explain your side of the story, explain everything that you know and can about your child, have meetings, have a good rapport with the school, get involved with the school. And I know, like I said, it's a hard thing to do sometimes because a lot of people don't have that much time to be able to do this. But if you go in there and say, hey, look, this seems to be happening. I'm not sure what's going on with you. Just make sure that communication is always open. And if you have to, just go in there like I do sometimes. I have to go in there and I have to sit there all day. So, and that's basically what I have, just make sure you keep communication open.
All great advice. Thank you, Ms. Amy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for the panel and anybody in the live chat, here's a question. Say you had people lobbying in your school district, like we had down in Texas, that wanted to get creationism, flat earth, or any of these quote unquote alternative theories actually taught in the school in a science environment versus a historical environment. How would you react? What would you do?
Well, I don't know if Catz and Jared feel the same way, but myself, I think I would oppose it pretty strongly, because those are topics that just do not belong in the science curriculum in any way.
I agree 100%. The question's got to be asked, what would a science lesson on flat earth, for example, look like? I can plan a series of 10, 15, 20 lessons on, on the current heliocentric model, because there's substance to it. What would they want me to teach? Would they want me to teach the sunsets? Would they want me to teach the seasons? Well, then tell us how. So I don't think I think I would more ridicule the idea than anything else. It wouldn't have any legs over here, I don't think.
Yeah. Jared, what do you say?
Yeah, I have to agree. You would definitely have to challenge it, and it would be one of those where I would challenge it and come at it from a different angle, to where I would tell them, my counter would be, it's like, okay, it can be taught in schools, but it's actually going to be put in its proper location. It's not going to be in the sciences. It's going to be in history and your social science, your social studies, those culture-based topics, because that's really where the information is relevant. And it's for exactly what you said, Catz, is you cannot go at those topics from a truly scientific standpoint and actually construct a lesson plan around it, because the majority of the answers are going to be, well, it just appears that way, or God did it. And those explanations have zero actual explanatory power.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth, Jared. And there was a purpose to that question, actually. I was actually wanting to steer the conversation just a little bit, because I have heard now, on the flip side of this coin, that I have heard the argument from the skeptic community, our community, make the claim that teaching your children flat earth is child abuse and you should have your children taken away from you. And now I'm probably going to torque off from people when I voice my opinion on this topic, so I'm going to let you guys sound off on this first.
That's a tough one. I don't really agree with taking their children away from them. I think that is probably going too far. But there needs to be some kind of re-education of the parent.
So I'm kind of on the fence with this, where I will play a middle ground where I can see it both ways, but it definitely wouldn't be a blanket, okay, if you're teaching your kids this, boom, they're gone. No, I'm not advocating for that, but it's on the board, because you have to think, what else is going on? If there is further activity going on that would classify as emotional abuse, let alone physical abuse, and any other potential pieces to the puzzle, if the entire puzzle comes together that warrants the action of removing the children from the home, then yes. But you have to have that entire puzzle. Just teaching flat earth alone, while it can be a large indicator, it is not the be-all, end-all that some people may want it to be.
Yeah, I agree. The kids have got to stay with the parents, unless if the flat earth is being delivered in a way where, obviously we know the connotations with it, that everybody has to be a liar, everybody has to be hiding things from you. And if that if that message, that sinister message, is damaging the kid's mental health in any way and making the child ill, well, like Joe just said, that's a slightly different topic. But just telling the kid that you think the Earth is flat, the kids have got to be with the parents.
Yeah, and here's my take on it. I don't know what it's like in other areas of the world, but in America, there is a thing known as mandatory reporting. So medical professionals, mental health professionals, teachers, we are by law required to report either to child welfare services or the police authorities when we have evidence that someone is harm to themselves or others. And so I have to weigh this really carefully as a clinical therapist and being a mandatory reporter. And I think my caveat to this is that as long as they're allowing their children what we would consider to be a normal education, I can't see the harm in a parent teaching their children their belief system. If they're denying them a proper education otherwise, then yes, I think I have to seriously consider calling child welfare about that. But, it's kind of like, where do I draw this line? Even though I despise the idea of flat Earth and I ridicule people on my channel that do it in a comedic way, where do we draw the line? What belief systems are we going to say are appropriate to teach your children? Which ones are not appropriate to teach your children? Because that's a slippery slope. We can, if we get into this, if you're a flat earther and you're teaching your kids flat earth, then you're going to lose your kids. That can lead into, well, if you're this religion or that denomination or this political party, then we're going to take your kids away. That may sound drastic, but there are unintended consequences to everything we do. And those are potential unintended consequences for making this blanket statement. I'm thinking that if they're allowing their kids to have a normal education, the worst thing that's going to happen, and it's not good, is that the child is going to discover that their parents are idiots. And no child should ever see their mom and dad as an idiot. Mom and dad should always be the hero. And that could really damage the parent-child relationship, and that's not healthy for either side.
No, it's not.
It's a great point.
Yeah, like I said, and I think we all agree, a piece of the puzzle, yes. The only piece to the puzzle, no.
Not by a long shot.
Okay. Just kind of wanted to see what everybody thought. I thought we were going to have a lot more discussion and disagreement on it, but okay.
So logical. You got to remember, this group that we have right here, we are level-headed and rational enough. I think that most of that rhetoric you end up hearing from the scientifically accurate group who may be advocating for that, they are coming from an emotional standpoint. They are thinking, they are jumping ahead to if they're teaching their kid this, what else are they doing? It must be egregious enough. I have to step in for that child. And while the heart and the compassion behind it is admirable, sometimes you got to slow your roll. As I told a number of my friends years ago during the prior administration, action for the sake of action is exceedingly rarely the proper choice. You have to actually analyze the situation. You actually have to look at what all of your options are and make an informed decision, no matter the circumstances and no matter the timing. That goes for any type of decision you are confronted with. Yes, some situations are going to be time sensitive, but the fundamentals and the foundation is still the same. If you just simply react from an instinctive or an emotional standpoint, you might get lucky, but chances are you won't.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amy, did this topic of conversation spark any sort of a firestorm inside of our chat?
Actually, no, everybody's been really having great conversations, but yeah, sorry, kiddo. But I did have a couple good comments. I had one from Glover Mom. Her kids' school was great. They encouraged parents' involvement. They welcomed her husband sitting on her son's classes because he had issues as well. And John Rapp said, logic and reason. I'm a team leader for a large disability services provider. I'm quite disappointed with the education level of some of our people, especially the high-functioning autistics. They're very smart. So
Absolutely. Autism does not mean stupid.
Absolutely.
Not in any way.
I can attest to that, too. That kid is smart as
No tires. Just
So, yeah. And Ugly German Truth said, I think it's also in part from personal experiences. Many of the anti-science parents teach their kids to be disruptive and to cause drama in the classroom instead of allowing the other kids to be properly taught and not just take part in it actively.
Right. And I was just informed by our producer that we're coming up on an hour and a half. I don't want to take this out too late because I know Jared and Amy are on the East Coast and it's almost 2:30 in the morning for them. And they actually, unlike me, have lives. So how about if we start kind of winding down and let's see if we have come to any sort of consensus about this conspiracy claim that we're talking about tonight. So I kind of think from what I've been hearing that no, education and indoctrination are not the same thing according to modern vocabulary usage, although in some places some indoctrination can happen when it comes to political agendas and religious theologies and agendas. I could be wrong in that assessment, but that's how I'm kind of seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, and as an educator of the primary level, I have to admit there is some indoctrination, but it's mostly in helping the children to learn proper social skills and how to work together, and they need to be indoctrinated in the rules of proper conduct. But that's as far as it goes. The rest is education.
I agree. I mean, I at the very beginning of the show, I opened up by saying there is no indoctrination in schools, etc. And in my head, when I was making that statement, I was thinking of the flat Earth, the definition of indoctrination. Us indoctrinating them away from the flat Earth into the heliocentric model. But of course, our religious schools that we've got plenty of here, you could quite happily say that they are reinforcing and indoctrinating religious beliefs. When we teach our own citizenship lessons or PSHE lessons in the UK, we are trying to indoctrinate the kids with correct behaviors, respect and etc., how to be a good citizen. So I don't think indoctrination should be a dirty word, but absolutely in terms of scientific indoctrination, then no.
No, there's none of that at all.
Jared?
No, I do have to concur. There are subjects that you can rationally and legitimately call indoctrination, but it's not the topics you conspiracy nuts think it is. When it comes to the sciences, when it comes to these advanced ideals, it's just that. The purpose is education. It's not just what the outcome is, but why is it that way? How do you get there? That way the person can do it themselves. From my experience as a military training instructor, it wasn't just me telling them, this is what you do in this situation. It's like, because I was in a technical field, it was, this is how the system is supposed to work. That would be the indoctrination part. Perfect world, this is how everything is supposed to work. Now, real world, here's what you're actually going to see. And that's when the education kicks in, is now that you know how it's supposed to work, you can address the system when it's not working in that way and figure out why is it messing up and how to fix it. And The only other thing that I would say would come close to indoctrination from a military training standpoint, and Troglodyte, I'm sure you're going to agree with me on this one, the majority of information in basic training to make you a basically competent soldier, sailor, airman, or marine, getting that foundation made for what the service you are committed to requires of you from a bare bones level. Everything else from that is education. It's additional on top of your foundation.
Absolutely.
Well said.
We both know that the military is a totally different culture for damn good reasons than the rest of the civilian world. And you're right. It doesn't matter what your MOS or rate is within the militaries. It's constant learning. And if we actually added up all of our class time, we would most of us probably have bachelor's or master's degrees by the time we had gotten to our end of obligated service.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Amy, is there any final thoughts going on in the chat room that they want to address to us or about us or anything else?
Very positive comments. Everybody's really enjoying this. I've seen some great conversations going on in the chat, and everybody's saying that they're looking forward to the next one. And it's been a really great show that they've all been saying, and it's been great conversations all over the place here. It's been great.
Oh, great. Thank you, guys. And I want to thank all of our audience for showing up tonight. And I forgot to mention it at the beginning of the stream that we are actually starting at a milestone. This is our 100 sub special. Amazing. Thank you all for helping this channel to get started with such a bang. And I wanted to let you know that we are only doing this every 2 weeks because Jeff and I have commitments to our personal channels. We have commitments to our personal lives. We both have wives. We both have commitments to the shills. So we don't want to overtax ourselves, even though that this type of discussion, I think, is really necessary within our community at this time. And so our next show is going to be at this same time on September the 22nd. The topic of conversation is the conspiracy claim that math is not reality. Our guests to help us explore that topic will be returning AT2 Productions, and joining him will be Mike Bertelson. I hope to see you all there.
As do I. Thank you all for coming, everyone, and a special thank to our two guests. You made this a really memorable show, and it was really great to talk to both of you.
Absolutely.
So, Jared, do you have something you'd like to share with the audience before we close out?
Just thank you guys for having me. It has been a blast. These are the types of conversations I love having, no matter the subject that is being talked about. If it's something I have experience with, like this week's topic and next week's, great. Even if it's something I don't have experience on, I love asking the questions and learning more and getting a better understanding. And I encourage that from everyone, whether you agree with me or not, whether you agree with someone else on the panel or not. Ask the questions, better yourself, better the world around you.
Absolutely. Well said. Catz?
Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for having us. I've really, really enjoyed this, and I'm sure this is going to be a massive success. I'm looking forward to watching it go from strength to strength. And I'll echo what Joe just said there as well, just about encouraging people to ask questions. That's one of the things conspiracy theories tend to throw at us. You know, they say, well, you need to do research, you need to ask questions, etc. But really, I think if they were genuine about asking questions and then finding the answers, then they wouldn't hold the opinions that they have. I think the questions are all being asked on our side, and they've been answered.
Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Logical?
I completely agree. there's been a few points here and there that I can sort of disagree with. And what I find interesting is that when we through our discussions, even when we were disagreeing, it almost didn't sound like we were disagreeing, and we eventually found a common ground and a consensus, and we didn't have to get emotionally wrapped up. Interesting how that happens when you actually look at something with some logic and reason.
Absolutely.
So, and thank you, gentlemen, for showing up and getting us started off with a bang. Jeff, you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I just want to once again thank our guests. It's been a great show. Thank you to all of our viewers for making this a 100 sub special, and as well as a great debut. And thank you, Amy, for all the great work you've done. And we hope to see you in our next show.
Yep. And Amy, I'll let you have the last word. Any thoughts?
Sure. Thank you both for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. This has been a great show, and thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to help out on the show. This has been great, and that's right. Thank you very much.
All right. And Tattie, if you can play that wonderful footage and take us out, we'll all say good night.
Good night, everyone.